Welcome to Perspectives with Asima Silva. Today we have a really interesting show. I was at a protest a few months ago, if people remember, with the issue that was happening in Gaza Strip in Palestine, with a lot of casualties and bombs, and there was a lot of it in the news. And I did attend a protest, and I was really impressed with this young girl who actually voiced her voice and had it heard on the speaker. And I approached her afterwards and I said, I would really appreciate it if you could come on my show and share those words. So I have my guest today here. Welcome. So we have Hind Mustafa from Sterling, Massachusetts, and her father Ibrahim, who is here accompanying her. And let's get started. And if you can just give us a little bit of your background, before you read us your speech, and then we can talk about why you were so empowered in wanting to have your voice heard.
Okay, so I've grown up in Sterling, Massachusetts. It's a small town near Worcester. My dad is from Palestine, my mom's from Syria, and we grew up speaking Arabic, listening to Arabic music, learning about our culture. And during the pandemic especially, I had a lot more time to think and reflect on my identity. So I started to ask my dad a lot more questions and stuff about Palestine. Same with my mom, about Syria, to become more connected to my culture.
And what did you find out about it?
Well, I found out a lot of different stuff. So first from my dad, I didn't at first realize how big the issue was. I had more of a, vague idea, and also naturally I'm really quiet and shy, so I didn't like to have an opinion that's different from the majority of Americans. It was uncomfortable for me. But I got just more confident, basically. It was also easier because I knew the organizers there. They're Ansar of Worcester. I go there. And they were pro-Palestinian, so it was much easier to voice my opinion than usual, you know what I'm saying?
Right. So before I have you do your speech that you had done, you said you're in Sterling, going to Wachusett.
Yeah.
So you've been remote. You haven't actually gone to the high school yet in person because of COVID.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm part of Wachusett too. A lot of our viewers know that, I'm in the Wachusett area, grew up in the Wachusett area myself. But, it's not a very diverse area.
Yeah.
Does it make you nervous going into a high school that is not as diverse, maybe compared to some of other neighboring towns?
Yeah, it does make me really nervous, especially, just knowing the mainstream, American worldview, and I'm usually not that confrontational. So it's especially with, everything that went on, with Trump and how he talked about Muslims and Palestinians and, Arabs in general. It's kind of nerve-wracking to go to a place where everybody's different from you.
So why don't we get started if you want to share your words that you had shared with us that day?
Do you want me to share specific highlights or the whole thing?
I think you can share the whole thing. I think it was pretty powerful.
Okay. A 10-year-old Gazan girl named Nadine has a message for us Americans. We can't do anything. We're just dying. The American people, stop giving weapons to the occupiers. That is the way that you can help us, she begs. The world has been shattered by the way, I wrote this back then, so it took more in recent terms, the recent earth-shattering airstrikes between the Israeli military and the Palestinian resistance. But what's truly striking is the difference in military power. Gaza has no recognized military, with only a few resistance groups, and their arsenals mainly consist of homemade weapons. In contrast, Israel is a country of soldiers where all citizens must serve in the military for 2 years. It also happens to be the most militarized nation on earth, with one of the most technologically advanced militaries. Despite this clear injustice, the United States taxpayers spend $3.3 billion annually on Israel. Just recently, President Biden approved a $735 million weapons deal. The most devastating impact of American support for Israeli apartheid is the impact on Palestinian children. 40% of children living in Gaza are under 14 years old. 90% of them have experienced trauma. Out of those 90%, 87% of those children living in Gaza are characterized as moderately to severely traumatized. To make matters worse, there are virtually no mental health facilities in Gaza. Experts say that trauma experienced by Gazan children is unlike any trauma faced by any children anywhere else in the world. The reality is that most Gazan children will never get help dealing with their horrific experiences, likely passing on this trauma to their children if they live to have them at all. And then I said, are we supposed to turn away now that there is a ceasefire? While media attention may lessen, we know that Palestinian suffering has not. I ask you, do not let our leaders turn a blind eye now that the media promises us a false sense of security. Over 5.6 million Palestinians are refugees, with over 91,000 internally displaced from recent escalations. The State of Israel would say that it is defending itself against Hamas. But the Palestinian resistance has killed 12 Israelis, including 2 children. Consider this, the Israeli military has slaughtered at least 263 Palestinians, including 66 children. At least 1,948 Palestinians are wounded, while hospitals are overflowing. To make matters worse, due to sanctions on Gaza that have been going on for many years, there is a lack of life-saving medical equipment. COVID-19 vaccines, food, electricity, and water. Israeli attacks damaged 24 healthcare facilities and destroyed the roads leading up to Gaza's biggest and most important hospital. In the middle of a worldwide pandemic, airstrikes have destroyed Gazans' only testing facility for COVID-19. While less than 2% of Gazans are vaccinated, 56% of Israelis have received the COVID-19 vaccine. The apartheid state hasn't just killed the future of so many children, but most Gazan children go to poor schools if they manage to go to school at all. It is a little tough when the State of Israel has destroyed 51 education facilities. I find myself asking how hospitals, schools, and media facility attacks by Israel are considered self-defense. Is this self-defense, or is that the excuse we, meaning the United States, and Israel give to justify our denial of Palestinian dignity and safety? The United Nations characterized a legal occupation of Palestine has been going on for more than 70 years, while Hamas has existed for just over 30. This is not about self-defense. This is about human rights. Muhammad al-Kurd, poet, writer, activist, and ethnically displaced former resident of Sheikh Jarrah, reminds us that no matter how difficult a dinner may become, once you mention Palestine, it will never be as hard as the reality Palestinians live. Thank you.
So I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for those words, those powerful words. It was obvious to me when I heard this at the protest that, you know, Hind had done a lot of research on her stats, and I myself did not know of these stats, even though I have been following this issue for a long time, for years. And while she was actually sharing her words with us, her father, who, you know, is sitting with us, had to walk away. I know it's hard for you, but do you mind sharing?
It's hard to see this, what's done in Palestine is done in my name as an American. I'm sorry for the Palestinian that they cannot tell a Palestinian woman or a man, they cannot tell their kids, go to sleep, we're going to take care of you. I read about a Palestinian woman that in Gaza, before she goes to sleep, she puts all her kids in the same room, and she sleeps with them, so that when an Israeli bombs come to destroy their house, they have the chance to die together. Is that fair to be done in my name? I don't accept this. And for the last minute in my life, I will do whatever in my power to bring justice to Palestinian. The most just cause in the world is attacked by some people have no mercy. The Palestinians have the right, the might of right, while the other side have
The right of
the right of might. That's the difference between the two people. I'm hoping for something where Palestinians who are displaced from their country can have the chance to go back and to share, at least to share this land, their land, with somebody who came from all over the world, Europe, Russia, America, to take their place based on a story. They cannot prove that they ever had their land touched before, or anybody that they say their ancestors that they were there. They have to, I can prove that I've been there. It's a continuous being there for 3,000 years. I was the last of it, but some people are still there. I was born in Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem until the effect and reflect of the creation of the state of Israel made of me a refugee, right? My continuation there is for 3,000 years. For them, they have to prove that any time in the history they were there. There is no evidence, and now the scholar of them, they say, reading the Torah, they say, the land, the story of the Torah, either the Torah is wrong or what's described in the Torah is somewhere else. The scholars of them say that, the archaeologists say, there is no one proof that connect the Torah with this land. Minding you, the people who came are not connected to the same people who were living there. Most of the Jews that they are in Palestine now are from East Europe. They converted to Judaism, and they have nothing to do with they have no connection with the Israelites. If anybody is connected, according to this story, to the story of history, if anybody is connected to the Israelite, if they were somewhere, if they were in Palestine, it should be the Palestinians themselves and nobody else.
So have you spoken to, like, I'm sure, but have you spoken to people of the Jewish faith or people of the opposite side? And, you know, have you listened to their side of the story? And what kind of things popped out? What was the kind of conversation that happened?
So I've had several different conversations with Jews. Most of them was online, but I did see at the protest there was this nice, nice girl, and she was wearing this shirt, I think that said Jews for Peace or something like that. And I came up to her and I really thanked her for support, because, you know, in the United States, it's difficult to stand up against the mainstream worldview of your community, especially such a small community. You can really be ostracized. And I have talked to a few Jews online. Some of them agreed with me, actually, and I was really pleased. It makes me so happy, more than anybody else, when Jewish Americans stand for Palestinians. You know, like Rachel Corrie, who somewhere in the 2000s, she stood in front of a Palestinian home to prevent it from being bulldozed, and they just killed her. But of course, even
Who killed her, I'm sorry?
The Israelis. Yeah, they didn't even though she was American, and America's the main ally of Israel, they closed the investigation without giving her any justice. To me, that shows that you're not really seen as the right type of Jew if you are able to stand with Palestinians. And as for seeing the other side, I have talked to pro-Israeli Jews and pro-Israeli non-Jews in the past, mostly online as well, because, as I said, I like to avoid confrontation most of the time. But always what stands out to me is their efforts to justify ethnic cleansing, to justify what is done to the Palestinians, and their effort to present it as a both sides kind of situation and not an oppressor and victim type of situation where some people are coming mostly from Europe, settler colonialism, and we have seen it in many parts of Africa, including, South Africa. We have seen it here in the United States with the way that Native Americans were oppressed by white settlers, and it's quite obvious that they try to overcomplicate the issue so nobody can speak about it and nobody can help Palestinians. But like any other case of settler colonialism, it's quite clear what side is on the right and what side is the oppressor. So I don't really have,
So
patience.
as you said, which is a great point, as you said, it's a colonial settler situation.
Of course.
But with history, we know how usually that ends up.
Yeah.
Do you have hope that this will end up differently?
I do. I have lots of hope, especially in the recent years. And with America, it's becoming more progressive, first of all. Although it's not, not 100%. Like, they're still making it sort of both sides deserve protection, not we need to stop oppressing Palestinians, let's take care of Palestinians. Because, you have to start somewhere. But we've seen lots of protests for Palestine, especially lots of universities have been very progressive, and with Palestine, lots of young people, the platform TikTok, I'm sure you've heard of it. Most people there are pro-Palestine. When everything happened, there were top hashtags on a social media site were trending for Palestine. I really think the tide is changing, and the cause is there as long as we have hope, and it is dead when we do not. And this goes for every case of oppressed people. I mean, even Native Americans, we have wiped them out to the extent that only 2% of them are left, but they still exist. They can still get better rights. They can still improve their situation. We can still apologize to them, give reparations. We can't do everything because we almost wiped them out, but there's still hope for them, and there's still hope for every oppressed people that one day the nation that is supporting the oppression, whether it be Israel or America or any other place, wakes up and gives them their rights. So hope is never lost.
That's absolutely beautiful, and I 100% agree with you. But as a young Palestinian American, do you foresee this maybe seeing it in your lifetime? Because you've already said it's been 70 years.
Yeah.
And we've been waiting. And part of that question is also because, like you said, a lot of people in America are realizing the complexity of this issue, of what's really going on. And like TikTok and social media is partly the reason why people are becoming more aware of the situation, aware of the other side's perspective. At least myself growing up, I only heard one side. Growing up in central Massachusetts, I only heard one side. And it was always through friends who were Palestinian that I would hear the other side. But now with social media, I have more access to maybe hearing some of the other side and maybe, understanding when something happens. There's another side to the story. So it's a two-sided question. One, do you believe that we're going to see some improvements in your lifetime? And if so, how does technology affect it?
We're definitely going to see some improvements, especially with lots of more young people nowadays are pro-Palestinian than before. So I do have lots of hope for that. And technology has really been a way to uplift Palestinian voices. If you see on the news, even places like the New York Times, respected American news stations, they'll interview 3 intellectual Israelis, one of them belonging to the Israeli government, and then they'll interview a random Palestinian on the street. And that's why Palestinians feel such a burden and responsibility to be so educated, because even though that's not their profession, to be a historian or to know everything there is to know about the oppression and occupation, it's even been ingrained into my mind to call it a conflict. But they have to be a voice when they don't know that much, and they have to educate themselves, and they have to fight to be presented versus somebody who is intellectual, has been studying the issue their whole life. It's not an equal playing field. So I'm happy to see social media uplift those who are more eloquent and more knowledgeable.
Right. What you described is, I think, a challenge for many minorities when they are looked upon as holding the weight of their entire race or religion or ethnicity to be a representative of that. So now, if I don't mind asking your dad, do you mind, we only have a few minutes, but you were born in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And you were there before this all started and the state was, was set as Israel. Can you describe to me, like, what was life before the state of Israel was established? I mean, I have heard, and I would like to know from your experience, that there were Christians and Jews in Jerusalem, and it was a very, diverse and happy and very inclusive type of culture. Now, I'd like to know straight from someone who was there before, what was your perspective?
Indeed. I am now taking you back while I'm 5 years old, after my mom and myself prayed in Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest mosques for the Muslims. My mom, with a walking distance, is the Church of Resurrection. We walked there, and my mom lighted a candle for Madonna, and she put it there, right? I was there the day that actually, in the Church of Resurrection, the day that they installed electricity in the church. A proud Ethiopian priest walking there, and we see construction there, and I asked my mom asked that priest, what's going on today in the church? And he says proudly, today we are installing electricity in the Church of the Resurrection. 1965 or 1965 or 66 or 65, before the invasion of Jerusalem. Our neighbor, who happened to be Christian, she always asked my mom to pray for her children and to pray for them coming back from their immigration, which, by the way, happened because of the creation of the State of Israel. They had to immigrate to America or somewhere else. My grandma was a Palestinian Jew. The creation of the State of Israel made of her refugee. The State of Israel is supposed to be a state for the Jews, right? And the State of Israel creation made of my Palestinian Jewish grandmother refugee, right? My mom tells me that because of the Sabbath in Jaffa, on the coast, their neighbors will knock at the door to them or shout at them. They tell them, today is the Sabbath. We cannot turn the lights on. Come and help us, right?
Light the candle.
It will light the candle. So her Muslim neighbors come and light the candles for them, so they help them to observe their Sabbath, all right? That's how Palestine was. Palestine was a place where, when Europe kicked and tortured the Jews in Spain, they migrated to Morocco, right? It was the Muslim countries that they took them, and they lived among us, and there was harmony in the community. There wasn't anything. It was the Zionist creation of the State of Israel that made that difference. Actually, I feel sorry for the Israelis themselves, because they are victims. Just like us, we are victims. They are victims for a colonial project that killed them so that the Western society can control this area, right? They are soldiers for the colonial power, right? And in a way, they are victims.
So
the solution, can I say?
Yes, please.
The solution was as simple as this: the Palestinian the Palestinian leadership, as early as 1965, they were talking about a secular democratic Palestine, where the comers and the indigenous, the Palestinian and the immigrants from Europe, can have a state where everybody is equal. Where I am the Indian of Palestine, I live equal to the white Jew who came from Europe. The Israelis, until now, they don't accept this to be the solution. One state solution, a secular democratic place, where 10% of them only accept, and they're not ready for this. All right. The Palestinians have been ready since 1965, and even in their constitution, the written constitution that they have, before before they have a state, they wrote and they defined what Palestine is and how Palestine should be. 1965.
I want to thank both of our guests. This is one of those topics that I know is, has many sides and many perspectives, but I wanted to have our viewers share personal perspectives from somebody from within our community. And I think what I hope happens is I hope Hind's wishes come true, that we do see what her father described as a Palestine before all of this conflict started, a Palestine where there was inclusion and diversity and people were of equal rights living in harmony. Thank you again for watching my show, Perspectives with Asima Silva. I hope you join again on our next show.